I used to pride myself on being the kind of wife who didn't question every little thing. My name is Claire, I'm 43 years old, and I thought after 15 years of marriage, I had this whole trust and loyalty thing figured out. My husband, Mark, worked in corporate logistics, which meant travel was just part of the package. Every couple of months, he'd pack his navy blue roller bag, kiss me on the cheek, and assure me he'd be back in 3 or 4 days. I never doubted him. Not once. At least, not in the beginning. The first few years, it felt almost romantic. He'd leave handwritten notes for me in the kitchen before his flights, little "miss you already" messages taped to the fridge or tucked under the coffee maker. I'd drop him off at the airport sometimes, watch him disappear past security, and drive home with this swelling in my chest because I believed distance only made us stronger. But time has a funny way of peeling the shine off habits. Those notes stopped around year 7. The check-ins became shorter, one-word texts, late-night calls where he sounded more distracted than tired. I told myself it was just the job. That's what long-term marriages are, right? The passion dips, life gets busier, but the foundation remains solid. That's what I wanted to believe. Then came the little cracks. The first one appeared one night when Mark returned from a supposed trip to Houston. I'd gone to wash his shirt for the next day and found a receipt in the pocket, not from Houston, but from a restaurant in Denver. I remember staring at the paper like it was some kind of riddle. He hadn't mentioned Denver. He hadn't said anything about a change in plans. When I asked him about it, he didn't flinch. He said, "Oh yeah, last-minute reroute. You know how these clients are." His tone was casual, practiced, like it was no big deal. I wanted to believe him, so I did. That's the thing about lies. They thrive in the spaces where you want comfort more than truth. Months passed, and the trips piled up. Chicago, Phoenix, Atlanta, supposedly. His suitcase smelled of unfamiliar cologne sometimes, not his own, a softer, floral kind of scent that didn't belong to him. He brushed it off. Hotel soaps, Claire. You know how strong those scents are. And then there were the calls. He'd answer me less and less when I phoned him while he was away. Meetings ran long. Bad reception. Fell asleep early. Always plausible, never quite satisfying. But the real turning point, the moment that shifted something deep inside me, came on a rainy Thursday night. He was supposedly in Dallas for a 3-day conference. I was home alone, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, when the phone rang. It wasn't Mark. It was his boss. "Hi, Claire," his boss said cheerfully, like we were old friends. "Sorry to bother you at home. I just wanted to double-check. Did Mark get back okay from his vacation?" Vacation. The word hit me like a slap. "Excuse me?" I asked, my heart suddenly hammering. "His vacation," the boss repeated, confusion in his voice. "He put in for 5 days. I just wanted to confirm he's back in town since we've got a client call tomorrow." I froze. My grip on the wine glass tightened so hard I thought it might shatter. Mark hadn't said a word about taking vacation time. As far as I knew, he was in Dallas working. I managed a shaky "yes, I'll let him know," and hung up before I could give myself away. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. Where was he if not in Dallas? Why did his boss think he was on vacation? And most importantly, who was he with? The next morning, Mark walked through the front door as if nothing had happened. His suitcase rolled behind him, his hair slightly mussed, his tie loosened. He kissed me on the cheek, dropped his bag by the stairs, and asked what was for breakfast. I stood there, frozen in the kitchen, every nerve in my body screaming at me to demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Because something told me this was bigger than a single lie, and if I wanted the truth, I'd have to be smart about how I got it. So I smiled. I poured him coffee. And silently, I started making my plan. The morning after Mark returned, I felt like I was watching him through glass. He sat at the kitchen table in his usual spot, scrolling absently through his phone while sipping coffee. The sound of the spoon clinking against the mug should have been comforting after 15 years of routine, but instead, it grated on me. Everything looked normal. That was the terrifying part. He asked me about the bills, about whether I'd rescheduled the pest control appointment. He chuckled at something on his phone. He even kissed me on the forehead before heading upstairs to shower, steam soon filling the hall. And the whole time, my mind replayed his boss's voice. Did Mark get back okay from his vacation? Vacation. Not work. Not Dallas. Vacation. As soon as the water turned on upstairs, I grabbed his bag. My heart pounded so loud I was afraid he'd hear it even over the shower. I dragged his suitcase into the laundry room, my hands trembling as I unzipped it. The first thing I noticed was that it wasn't packed the way he usually did. Mark was meticulous with clothes, shirts folded sharp, socks rolled like little grenades. But this time, things were shoved in carelessly. His slacks were wrinkled, balled up at the bottom. One shirt smelled faintly of perfume. Not cologne, not detergent, perfume. Sweet, floral, unmistakable. I pressed it to my nose and felt my stomach twist. Digging deeper, I found a receipt crumpled at the bottom of the bag. A restaurant bill. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, dessert. It was dated from 2 nights ago. Not from Dallas, though. From Santa Fe. Santa Fe. He hadn't been anywhere near Dallas. My fingers shook so badly the paper almost slipped from my hands. I stuffed everything back into the bag just as I heard the shower cut off upstairs. I zipped it shut, shoved it back by the stairs where he'd left it, and forced myself to breathe. I needed proof. More than a perfume-scented shirt and a dinner receipt. If I confronted him now, he'd have an explanation ready, polished and calm. Mark had always been good with words. He could make you feel crazy for even asking the question. So I decided I wasn't going to confront him yet. I was going to watch. Quietly. Carefully. That week, I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. He said he was going to the gym on Tuesday night, but when I checked the location history on our shared car app, it showed the vehicle parked at a downtown hotel. I waited up until midnight, pacing the living room, my stomach in knots. When he walked in, he smelled faintly of wine. He said the gym ran late. He didn't even look guilty. Wednesday, I checked the credit card statement. A charge from a boutique hotel spa appeared. He told me he'd had takeout with the guys from work. Thursday, he announced another business trip, this one supposedly to San Diego. He packed quickly, shoving clothes into the same navy roller bag. I kissed him goodbye at the door, smiled, waved, and then drove to the airport after he left. I parked across from departures, my palms sweaty against the steering wheel. For 30 minutes, I waited. No sign of Mark. I scanned the glass doors, the curbside check-ins, the taxi drop-offs. Nothing. My chest grew tight with dread. Then my phone buzzed. A text from him. Flight delayed. Already at the gate. Love you. I stared at the words, my blood running cold. He wasn't at the gate. He wasn't even at the airport. My hands shook as I pulled out of the parking lot, following a hunch that took me 30 minutes across town to that same boutique hotel where the spa charge had appeared. I pulled into the lot, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. And there it was. His car. Parked neatly near the side entrance. I sat in my own car for what felt like hours, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. People walked past, couples laughing, bellboys pushing carts of luggage. And every minute that ticked by, the realization grew heavier. My husband wasn't just lying. He was living a lie, bold and unashamed. I couldn't go inside. Not yet. My body screamed to storm through those doors and catch him red-handed, but another part of me, the colder, quieter part, knew I needed more. If I confronted him, he'd twist it. He'd call me paranoid. He'd say I was imagining things. So I went home. I sat in the dark living room, staring at the glow of the street lamp outside, waiting. At 1:37 a.m., I heard his car pull into the driveway. The sound of the garage door creaked open, then shut. A moment later, the front door clicked, and he stepped inside. His hair was mussed, his tie missing, his shirt untucked. Flight canceled, he muttered as he set down his bag. I'll go back tomorrow. I nodded, my face blank, my throat tight. He leaned in to kiss me, and I let him. But inside, something had shifted. The trust, the comfort, it was gone, replaced by a growing, icy rage. I needed proof. Proof I couldn't ignore, proof he couldn't explain away. The next morning, I called a private investigator. The private investigator's office was nothing like I imagined. No dimly lit blinds or cigarette smoke curling through the air. Just a modest little space above a law office downtown, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the corners. His name was Daniel. Early 50s, thinning hair, steady voice. The kind of man who had probably seen it all and didn't flinch at much anymore. He listened as I poured out everything, the suspicious trips, the receipts, the hotel, the perfume. When I finished, he tapped his pen against his notebook and said simply, "You're not crazy. You just need clarity. I'll get it for you." It felt both terrifying and comforting to hear someone else validate what I already knew deep down. I wasn't imagining this. Mark was hiding something. For the first week, Daniel shadowed him. He called me each evening with a clipped, professional update, followed subject from office to hotel. Met with unidentified woman, brunette, mid-30s. Dinner lasted 3 hours. Physical affection observed. Each word pierced deeper. I'd sit in my car after those calls, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached, trying not to scream. Mark never suspected a thing. He came home at the usual times, kissed me on the cheek, asked about groceries, bills, family. The normalcy was maddening. Then one night, Daniel called with a different tone in his voice. Not professional. Cautious. "Claire," he said, "I think we should meet in person." I drove to his office the next morning, my stomach twisted in knots. He slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside were photographs, grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. Mark wasn't just having dinner with a woman. He was holding her hand across the table. His smile was wide, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. In one photo, she leaned into him, her lips brushing his cheek. In another, his arm was around her waist as they walked into that same boutique hotel. The ground seemed to fall out beneath me. But that wasn't the worst of it. Daniel hesitated, then slid another sheet across the desk. "Claire, there's something else." I looked down. It was a copy of a public record. A lease agreement. For an apartment in Santa Fe. Signed not just by Mark, but also by the woman. "Her name's Emily," Daniel said quietly. "She's 35. Works in marketing. They've had this lease for 6 months. 6 months. My mouth went dry. He hadn't just been sneaking around in hotel rooms. He had another home. Another life. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I flipped through more photos, more documents, rent receipts, utility bills. It was all there in black and white. He wasn't traveling for work. He was traveling to her. When I left Daniel's office, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring blankly at the steering wheel. My mind was a storm of rage and disbelief. 15 years of marriage, reduced to ashes. But as the fury began to settle, something colder took root. A determination I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to confront him blindly. Not yet. I was going to let him dig his own grave. That evening, when Mark walked through the door with his easy smile, I played my part. I asked about his trip, nodded at his story, even laughed at one of his jokes over dinner. But inside, I was making my plan. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered quietly. Bank statements, pay stubs, emails. Daniel provided more surveillance photos, Mark and Emily grocery shopping together, Mark carrying a box of wine into the apartment, Emily kissing him in the parking lot. The evidence piled higher and higher until it was undeniable. And then, one night, I got the call that shattered the last fragile piece of denial I had left. It was Daniel again. His voice low, steady. "Claire, you're going to want to sit down for this." I sank onto the couch, my heart racing. "What is it?" He hesitated, then said, "They're not just living together sometimes. He's telling people they're engaged." The world spun. Engaged. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was building a second future, a second life, as if I didn't exist. My hands went cold. My vision blurred with hot tears. But under the grief, a sharp, electric fury crackled to life. Mark thought he was clever. He thought I was blind. He thought he could build a new life while keeping me in the old one. He had no idea that I was done playing the role of the trusting wife. Because now I had every piece of proof I needed. And I knew exactly how I was going to use it. By the time I decided to confront Mark, the evidence filled an entire box. Photos, bank records, printouts of messages Daniel had managed to uncover. I kept it hidden in the back of the closet, behind a stack of old Christmas decorations, where I knew Mark would never bother to look. Every day, the temptation to throw it all in his face grew stronger. But I held back, waiting for the perfect moment. Not when he could brush it off. Not when he could twist it and make me feel like the crazy one. No, I wanted him cornered. Trapped. With nowhere to run. That moment came one Saturday evening. He was heading to Phoenix for yet another conference. I'd cooked dinner early, his favorite pasta, a dish I hadn't made in months. He seemed pleasantly surprised, kissed me on the cheek, sat at the table, and twirled the fork in his usual way. I watched him eat, every muscle in my body tight. How many dinners had he shared with her the same way? How many lies had he fed us both, back to back? Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork and said, "Mark, we need to talk." He froze for just a second, so slight most people wouldn't notice, but I did. He swallowed, forced a smile. "Sure, what's up?" I reached under the table, pulled the manila envelope I'd prepared, and slid it across to him. He frowned, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and opened it. The first photo fell into his lap. Him, holding Emily's hand across the table at that little restaurant in Santa Fe. His face drained of color. He flipped through the rest, him carrying groceries with her, kissing her in the parking lot, walking arm in arm into their apartment. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. My heart pounded so loud it filled my ears. Finally, he whispered, "Claire, I can explain." I laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh I recognized. It was sharp, bitter, foreign in my own mouth. Explain? Really? You're going to explain living a double life? An apartment? An engagement? His head snapped up, eyes wide. He cut himself off, jaw tightening. Who told you that? I don't need anyone to tell me anything, I said coldly. I have eyes. I have records. You've been lying for months, years, maybe. And now I know everything. He rubbed his hands over his face, groaning. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I slammed my hand on the table. The sound echoed through the kitchen. Then what was it supposed to be, Mark? 2 wives? 2 lives? You get to come home to me, your stable little anchor, while you play house with her across the state. His shoulders slumped. For the first time in 15 years, he looked small. Pathetic. It just happened, he muttered. I didn't plan it. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at him, disgust curling in my gut. You don't accidentally sign a lease. You don't accidentally buy her flowers, or take her to dinner, or tell people you're engaged. His silence was damning. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not when he didn't deserve to see me break. So what now, Mark? I asked, my voice sharp. What's your plan? You walk out that door tonight for your conference and go crawling back to her? Or were you going to string me along a little longer until you got caught? His lips parted, but no words came. He just stared at me, trapped, like a cornered animal. I want you out, I said finally, my voice shaking but firm. Tonight. Pack your things and go. His eyes widened. Claire, please. No, I snapped, standing so fast the chair screeched against the tile. Don't beg now. You had every chance to tell me the truth. You chose lies. You chose her. So go live with her. He stood too, hands out like he could calm me. She doesn't mean what you think. Stop. My voice cracked like a whip. Every word out of your mouth is poison. I can't even look at you anymore. For a moment, he looked like he might fight back, argue, make one last desperate plea. But then his shoulders sagged. He grabbed the envelope, stuffed the photos back in, and shoved it into his bag. Without another word, he walked upstairs. I stood frozen, listening to drawers open and close, the scrape of hangers, the thud of shoes being packed. My chest heaved, my hands shaking violently. 30 minutes later, he came down with his suitcase. He stopped in the doorway, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read, regret, maybe, or shame. I never meant to hurt you, he said softly. I laughed again, bitter and hollow. You didn't mean it? That's the cruelest part, Mark. Because it means I never even mattered enough for you to make a choice. You just let it happen. He flinched, then opened the door. The sound of it closing behind him echoed through the house, final and cold. For a moment, I stood in the silence, waiting for the tears to come. But they didn't. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the table, picked up his half-empty plate, and scraped the pasta into the trash. My hands were steady now. My heart was still hammering, but there was a strange, sharp clarity cutting through the fog. Mark was gone. For good. But this wasn't over. Because as much as he thought he'd gotten away with something, he had no idea what I had planned next. The first night after Mark left, the house felt cavernous. Every sound echoed, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the pipes, even my own breathing. For 15 years, his presence had filled this space. Now it was just me and the silence. I expected to collapse, to curl up on the couch and sob until I couldn't anymore. But instead, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where he used to sit. My hands were steady. My mind was sharp. Grief would come later. For now, I had work to do. The next morning, I called our bank. I froze our joint account, moved half into my own name. I called a lawyer, a woman recommended by Daniel, tough as nails, with a reputation for cutting through lies like a blade. By lunchtime, she had already drafted the paperwork for separation. Mark tried calling that evening. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice thick with something between regret and panic. "Claire, please, we need to talk. Don't do anything rash. I'll come by tomorrow." I deleted it. 2 days later, he showed up at the house unannounced. I didn't let him inside. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, the sunlight glaring behind me. "Claire, please," he begged. "It was a mistake. I don't want to lose everything. We can fix this. Fix this." I said, my voice cold. "You built another life, Mark. You promised yourself to someone else. You didn't just trip and fall into her arms, you stayed there." His face twisted, shame and desperation flickering across it. "She doesn't mean what you think." It wasn't. "Stop lying," I snapped. "I know about the apartment. I know about the engagement. Don't insult me by pretending it was nothing." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting away. For the first time, I realized he wasn't just ashamed, he was afraid. "Good. You don't get to walk away from 15 years of marriage with your head held high," I continued. "You don't get to burn down our life and think you'll just start fresh without consequence." His jaw clenched. "What do you want, Claire?" I leaned closer, my voice low and steady. "I want you to feel the weight of every choice you made. I want you to know that the woman you betrayed, the woman you thought would roll over and forgive, she's the one who's going to take everything you thought you had left." And with that, I handed him the separation papers. The weeks that followed were brutal, but strangely liberating. My lawyer was relentless. She uncovered financial secrets I hadn't even known about, hidden accounts, unexplained transfers. Each one was another nail in the coffin of Mark's credibility. Emily, it turned out, hadn't signed up for this mess. When the truth came crashing down about me, the marriage, the financial fallout, she left him. Daniel confirmed it. The apartment lease was terminated. The photos he showed me of Mark moving out alone, head down, were the most satisfying images I'd ever seen. He tried calling again after that. Begging. Pleading. Even showing up at my work once, eyes bloodshot, saying he had nowhere to go. I looked him in the eye and said, "You should have thought about that before you built your fairy tale." Then I walked past him, leaving him standing there in the parking lot, a ghost of the man I once loved. But here's the part one didn't expect. As the weeks turned into months, something inside me shifted. I thought I'd be consumed by bitterness. I thought I'd wake up every day with rage burning a hole in me. But instead, I began to feel lighter. I painted the bedroom a new color. I rearranged the furniture. I started cooking meals for myself, not for us, just me. Meals I actually enjoyed. I took long walks in the evenings, the kind I used to skip because I was waiting for him to get home. Now, the only person I was waiting for was me. And slowly, I realized that revenge wasn't the point anymore. I'd already won. Not because I destroyed him, but because I chose myself. Mark's betrayal didn't break me, it freed me. One afternoon, nearly 6 months later, I was sitting at a cafe with a friend when I saw him. Mark. Alone at a corner table, his suit wrinkled, his hair thinner, his shoulders slumped. He looked tired, defeated. For a moment, our eyes met. He froze, like he didn't know whether to wave or hide. I just held his gaze for a second, then turned back to my friend, smiling at her story. I didn't need to acknowledge him. I didn't need to prove anything. Because the truth was, I'd already taken back everything he thought he'd stolen: my confidence, my independence, my peace. And as I walked out of that cafe, the sunlight warm on my face, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I was free,